Go.
My name is Sarah Herbert. Speech number 3, the informational speech. Many people struggle when choosing the right kind of paint to use when first beginning a project. It is important to keep in mind what type of painting you wish to produce and how much time you want to spend on your painting. Different paints will produce your own unique style, and each one has its advantages and disadvantages. So, acrylic, oil, and watercolor paints all have their own unique histories along with advantages and disadvantages. Acrylic paint has a rather short and sweet history, but it has many pros and cons. Acrylic paint was first developed in 1901. A noted chemist by the name of Dr. Otto Rahn developed the first synthetic acrylic resin in his German laboratory. When creating the paint, he used durable fibers along with lucite and plexiglass. It wasn't until 1930 that DuPont brought his ideas to America for commercial production. Even then, it did not appear in the commercial market until the 1950s. Since the 1950s, acrylic paints have been altered. They are now a water-based medium with a consistency similar to that of oil paints. Unlike oils, however, acrylics can be bought in a variety of densities. Acrylic paints have many advantages. First of all, acrylic paints dry quickly. Many artists like acrylic paints because they dry fast. Therefore, it relieves them from having to keep the paints from touching. And then another advantage is that acrylic paints also have the ability to adhere to almost any surface. So whether it's a rock, a piece of wood, glass, canvas, or anything else, the artist can paint on top of it without having to prime the surface first. A final advantage of acrylic paint is that it provides an even tone. There are no excessively shiny or dull places in the painting, and so the whole piece looks unified, and it doesn't have any spots that stand out. Acrylic paints also have many disadvantages. So, although some find the fast drying quality of acrylics to be a good thing, some artists also find it to be a bad thing, because since acrylics dry fast, you don't have the ability to blend the paint or to add shading. And this is especially troublesome when you have to paint skies or landscapes. And another disadvantage to acrylic paint is that it is difficult to remove from brushes. And if the paint is left to dry on either a brush or a palette knife, it is really difficult to remove. And because of this, an artist has to go through many brushes, and it can get expensive, because brushes actually, they cost quite a bit if you keep like the better, nicer quality brushes do. So although acrylic paint is one of the most commonly used paints, oil paint is probably the most popular. Oil paints have a rather extensive history, and they are used for many of their advantages. The oldest known oil paintings date back to 650 AD, and these were found in some of the caves in Afghanistan's Bamiyan Valley, and these used walnut and poppy seed oils. And then throughout time, a lot of the Greek, Romans, and Egyptians used vegetable oils in their oil paintings. And then it wasn't until Jack Van Eyck, he reinvented oil paints, and he used mineral pigments along with linseed oil. And oil paints, they have many advantages. The first of which is that they dry really slowly. And this gives the artist more time to blend colors and add shading. And additionally, because the paint dries so slowly, you're able to remove paint weeks after, and this can help you with mistakes or moving things around. Another advantage to oil paints is that they don't change color over time. And acrylics, they tend to darken as they dry, but oils, they tend to stay the same throughout time. And so, another advantage to oil paints is that there are a lot of styles that you can use since they are such a thick paint. And one example of a different style that you can use is glazing. And glazing is a technique that you can use in which there are several layers of transparent paint put on top of each other. And you have to wait until one layer of paint dries before you add another layer. And you keep going on like so on and so forth. And then that helps to add a certain kind of glow and brightness. And whenever you do glaze, you can use linseed oil. And you mix linseed oil with paint, and that helps create the translucency. Oil paints, they also have disadvantages. If you use linseed oil, your oil paint can yellow over time, and it can also darken, and a lot of people don't like that. And then another disadvantage is that oil paint does take a long time to dry, and then if you paint something with oil paint and then paint over top of it before that bottom layer dries, it'll crack on top. So oil paint is a really, like I said, a thick and very opaque paint, and this is in great contrast to watercolor. Watercolor is a really thin paint, but it also has its own unique qualities. Watercolor came into Western artists in the late 1400s, and around 1776 the paint took on the form of a soluble but solid block that had to be dissolved in water. And it wasn't until Winsor Newton introduced a glycerin softened formula, in which the public really liked, because it was like a paste that you can mix with the water instead of like a block of paint. Watercolor, it has many advantages. And one of the advantages is that it is easy to mix large quantities of paint. And you don't need water beforehand, so you can mix the paint together and get the color that you want, and then you can add the water later. Watercolor paints, they're also very easy to clean up. The paint is very soluble and it can be removed from paintbrushes at almost any time. So it's good in that respect. You don't have to buy new paintbrushes all the time. And then a final advantage is that it is very cost efficient. The paint is extremely concentrated, and so a little can go a long way. As you can see, this is a tube of watercolor paint, and it's not a very big tube, but you add water to this and you can get a lot more paint. So watercolors, they also have disadvantages. One of the disadvantages is that it's hard to judge how much paint you need to squeeze out in order for you to complete a painting. So there are times when you end up with excess paint, and so that'll dry and you end up wasting it. Another problem is that once a paint is contaminated with another color, it is hard to retrieve. And a final disadvantage is that watercolors often show brush strokes in your pictures, and so there are times when the paper warps and the color will kind of concentrate on that area. So watercolor is certainly a medium that requires much practice, but it can be one of the most free types of paintings. Either way, it is one of the three most popular mediums used in painting. So in closing, there are many advantages and disadvantages to acrylic, oil, and watercolor paintings. Each has their own unique styles, and overall these paints bring something different to the table. And so they can all be combined to create different pictures, and also just experiment with different kinds of paints to get the one that you like best.